Hello, everyone, and welcome to now episode 7 of Taking Back the Narratives, season 3, where we discuss the post-genocide reality, the post-Jewish genocide reality. So I am so honored and thrilled to have on my dear friend, Rebecca Harary. So, Rebecca, I met you. I remember this so clearly. I was working on Naomi Levin's campaign in 2018. I don't know if you remember this. And she had mentioned your name, that you were running for office on the Upper East Side, and we were on the West Side. So we were running against Nadler. And there were so many politicians that were being mentioned on a weekly basis. So I didn't connect any dots. I didn't do any research. And so we came to join your team. I believe we were handing out flyers. There's a specific name in politics. I think it's called, help me out here.
Palm cards?
Palm cards. Yes, palm carding. It's been a while since I've actually volunteered on a campaign. Now I do more strategy. So, anyways, we were palm carding. And even before I met you, I remembered seeing your campaign material. It was attached to a utility pole. And obviously, it said your name, your top couple of platforms. And one of the platforms said, proud Israel supporter. And at the
Oh,
time, no one else was talking about that. There were other Jew. I was working for a Jewish candidate. The
mhm.
Israel issue was not being brought up. And I met you. And not only were obviously you are warm and friendly, but you were so passionate. You were passionate and are to this day about politics, about Israel. And then, so our connection, our brief connection from politics, I remember then merged when I attended the first ever anti-Semitism conference through when you were working at B'nai Zion. And
Mhm.
what impressed upon me was that I believe this was 2019 at this point, like beginning of 2019. Yeah.
Probably not 18,
And
19.
and the anti-Semitic assaults in New York City were upticking. And what I was so impressed with you, and so for the audience to know as well, you were the first one to initiate a counter anti-Semitism conference. And then I remember it was just an inspiration to everyone else because for the next year, almost every month, I was getting invitations to counter anti-Semitism conferences. But you were the first one. You brought the attention where it was needed. And then, of course, we remained in touch. And I followed you when you launched CASEPAC. We'll get into that. Of course, I want you to mention a little bit more about that to the audience and all the great work that you're doing to help get President Trump reelected and to bring Jewish voices to the Republican Party. So I am just so simply honored and happy and thrilled that you took some time to speak with us today. So thank
Thanks
you.
for inviting me. This is a thrill. This is fun.
So great. So if you can tell the audience a little bit more about yourself, of course, we'll get into details a little bit later on, but just an overview, just so the audience knows.
Married over 40 years to a wonderful man, Joe, my husband, Joe. We have 6 children. We have a bunch of grandchildren now. I was a business owner for about 10 years. I was an event planner. Then I was asked by FIT to be a professor and teach event planning there, which was great. It was a lot of fun. From there, I'm from the Sephardic Jewish community in Brooklyn, New York. And I saw that there were several, what's the word, pockets of need. And so over the years, I founded, with a lot of help from a lot of very, very dedicated community members, 5 different nonprofit organizations for our community, including a school for autism, a school for children with mild learning challenges, a women's workforce initiative. There's several things that we did. And then from there, I decided really, I, I really decided that New York City was falling apart and needed some more, guidance and strength and help. So I decided to run for office with a lot of support. I ran twice. The first time I ran, well, both times that I ran, I received the most amount of Republican votes, or the most amount of votes. There were actually a lot of crossovers. But it's New York City. I still lost both times. The first time I ran was for New York State Assembly. The second time I ran was for New York City Council. I think the council has about 52 seats, and I'm not sure, I think there's only 4 Republicans.
Mhm.
The rest are all Democrats. And unfortunately, that's what's going on. And we all know that, there's a huge decline in New York City now. And between what happened with de Blasio and now with Mayor Adams, it's really, really upsetting. I generally am the kind of person that really just looks for gaps, looks for problems, and then I try to fill them in any way that I can. I guess that's, being the oldest of 8 children and, always being there for my brothers and sisters and then for my own kids and all the different things and a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful supportive husband who pretty much anything I decide to do, he's right there behind me. So it's all been good, thank God.
And that's so wonderful. And it's also great that you're mentioning your husband because, often spouses are not mentioned, right? People take credit and
Oh, no,
not
no.
realizing that they're a teammate
Yeah.
that are
No,
needed.
I couldn't do, there's nothing I could do if it wasn't for Joe. First of all, he's an attorney,
Mhm.
so he keeps me legit and reads all my contracts and, keeps it all
I
legit.
might need to hire your husband as well.
Okay.
That's
Go
what I was
ahead.
gonna say. No, and this is also impressive. And you are an inspiration. And I don't know if I ever had a chance to tell you in our several meetings, but you were an inspiration to me and what got me to start taking back the narrative. Just like you mentioned, you look for gaps. And same thing how I started the Zionism Education Company. There's so many pro-Israel organizations, as we know, like it's an alphabet mishmash at this point,
It
and
is.
anti-Semitism kept rising. And so I looked for that gap. What is missing in that space? Accurate Zionism education, filling in the gaps between biblical times and 1948, when Israel was not founded, it was not created, it was liberated by brave Jews, nothing to do with the UN. And so I would be honored to share this with you. But in the beginning, when things were so difficult and you don't know what direction you're going, and am I putting out too much information, too little information? Am I utilizing all the sources? Am I working with the right people? I cannot tell you, Rebecca, how many times I thought of your hard work in politics. It's true in both politics and within CASEPAC, which we definitely need to dive into shortly. And so I truly thank you. And even though you're not an official mentor of mine, but I count you as a mentor. So
Aw.
I'm so
Laureen, you're
grateful to
doing
you.
incredible stuff. And for all of your audience members, let me tell you, Laureen is the bomb. She really knows what she's doing. She has an incredible insight. You have done so much research and put it all together. You are really awesome. And if anybody really wants a good, really strong understanding of Jewish history, all you have to do is go to her website. It's awesome.
Which we'll mention a little bit later. So,
Yeah.
speaking obviously of Zionism and being proud Jews, so I asked this of all my guests, and we can take it in whichever direction you would like. What does Zionism mean to you?
What does Zionism mean to me?
Mhm.
Well, it's a loaded question. It
Exactly.
represents, Zionism represents support for Israel, which is our Jewish homeland. It's a symbol of Jewish self-determination and security. Um, Israel and, being a Zionist, I view Israel as a safe haven, believe it or not, given to us by God. And I would say that Zionism really connects me to Jewish history
Mhm.
and all of the wonderful things that Jews have done as the chosen people for humankind, for the world. We've contributed positively so much to the world that it makes me very proud to be a Zionist and a Jew. But, on the other hand, there's also a responsibility to be a Zionist, and that is a responsibility of protecting Israel, protecting the Jewish people, and protecting our future. In my own way, I like to do that through not only fighting back when, things are wrong, when, for example, anti-Semitism, but also through education,
Mhm.
and just like you're doing, and to help people understand who they are, where they came from, where they're going, where the Jews are going, what we can do, what Israel can do as a nation, what Jews around the world can do as a Jewish people, to help everybody around them and to help each other stay strong.
That's such an excellent answer. And I have not had anyone yet talk about the responsibility aspect,
Oh,
which is true, right? And that's why I ask all of the guests, because Zionism can be interpreted. I mean, of course, we have the actual more academic answer, like what is Zionism? Zionism is the self-determination of the Jewish people in their own homeland. That's a given. But then where do we go from there? So for me, and let me ask you a question before we move ahead. Were you
okay.
always a Zionist?
Yes,
Okay.
always,
Okay.
always. Always.
Okay.
Before I even knew what that meant,
Mhm.
I don't really think the word Zionist came into my vocabulary before high school. But I grew up in Florida. My mother sent us to Hebrew school all the way through, I think all the way through high school, or at least the 10th or 11th grade. And we loved it. And we went after school. We were with other Jews. I went to public school. So I tried to find and make as many Jewish friends as I could. I understood that we were all in this together, whatever that was. And to be a Zionist to me is a huge responsibility, but it's also a source of pride. I've always felt
True.
that way.
And the fact that you determined that we're all in this together, we have to stick together, that was very mature thinking at such a young age. So for me, so for those who might not know, I actually did not even know that I was a Jew until I was 7 years old. I don't know if I ever told you that
I did
story.
not know that.
Oh, all our meetings, lunch meetings, I didn't tell you.
I
Okay, so
didn't know you were a Jew.
I did not know I was a Jew. So I guess you don't know how I found out I was a Jew either.
No.
So I was okay. So I'm first generation American. For those who might not know, my parents came from communist Russia, which is the operative word. So they grew up without any sense of faith. They knew that they were ethnically Jewish because it was very much pointed out. So a little history lesson during the start of communism, when Bolsheviks were in charge, many Jews were Bolsheviks. So they made anti-Semitism illegal and actually punishable by prison time. The more extreme Bolsheviks were even killing anti-Semites in the streets for all of those centuries of Tsarist anti-Semitism, right? Like there was retribution. But then after World War II, Stalin had state-sponsored anti-Semitism, so Jews were discriminated against. I had trouble getting apartments, getting jobs, and my mom would recount how in school her teachers would call her Žid, which is equivalent to kike, in English, and on and on. So
Was
it's
there a large Jewish population in Russia at the time?
absolutely, but they were stuck, right? Like they couldn't, when Israel was finally what's it called, when the brave Jews finally liberated Israel, they could not leave, right? Like there were quotas and restrictions, and the whole refuseniks movement. Natan Sharansky, probably the most famous one, when he ended up in prison, for being
Yeah.
for Israel. And so, and that translated to how I had my early childhood. So my parents immigrated here. Their focus was to start a new life. It wasn't to teach us our faith, which they themselves didn't know. And so, we would have holiday dinners. I loved seeing my extended family, but no one explained why we're having this holiday dinner. No one had said, this is Hanukkah. Like we would have Hanukkah foods, we would have the latkes and everything. No one explained why we're eating that. No one explained why we're having matzah on Pesach. None of that. So fast forward to I was about 7, 8 years old, and I'm watching a popular show and dating myself called Lassie, where the protagonist was a blonde Christian boy who
Yeah,
prayed
Timmy.
to me. Yes. So he prayed to
That was
Jesus.
my age.
So he prayed to Jesus every night. And so
Yeah.
I copied. And so I got on my knees and crossed myself and prayed to Jesus, thinking nothing of it, thinking every child in America does this. And so this probably went on for a couple of weeks. And one night my father walks by my room, looks what I'm doing, and says, we need to have a talk.
Oh,
And that's
wow.
when I found out that I was a Jew. And I, like you, was thrilled. I was like, oh my gosh, now I can be like my Jewish friends. I can go to Hebrew school. But again, coming from a communist country and my parents being staunch Republicans, they said, we only have one synagogue near us and the rabbi's too liberal. So no way are you going to Hebrew school. And that was it. You don't really fight back with a Russian Jewish father. So
But I must say, your parents must have been felt very liberated to come to America and
yes,
be out and open and be Jewish, you know.
the first
And
thing they did was buy a shotgun because you could not have weapons in Russia.
oh,
So
wow,
talk about embracing the rights of Americans.
absolutely,
Yeah,
wow.
exactly.
Oh,
Again, it wasn't something like, like I had a grandmother who lived in Netanya. I remember my parents would send checks once a year to American Friends of Magadam and Adom. So little bits of Israel were always in my ear, but
mhm.
it was not emphasized like, okay, like this is our homeland. We are ethnic Jews. We can talk a little bit more in detail why so many American Jews are not voting Republican, or at least they used to not, or what keeps many of them in
Totally.
Israel, because I embody that story too. So I didn't understand that that's my homeland. To me, Israel was just a Jewish country over there,
Mhm.
right? It was where my grandmother happened to live. I didn't understand. No one told me why she lived there. Like to me, it was no different than her choosing, let's say, France or England, to live. And so then my bat mitzvah age was coming near, and I really wanted to have a bat mitzvah. So I had a babysitting business. So I offered to pay for lessons. And my parents said, okay, forget about all that. We're going to do you one better. We're going to take you to Israel and we're going to have your bat mitzvah transliterated on top of Masada. So we went,
Awesome, incredible parents.
yeah.
Yeah.
So they just skipped. They skipped like the entire Jewish upbringing. So I went to Israel, loved it. Knew that it was special. Again, no one explained to me, even in Israel, like this is our homeland, why
Right.
why this is so important. But anyway, but I liked it. I liked the experience. I felt different there. Came back, couldn't stop talking about the trip to all of my friends, Jews, non-Jews. That's it. I'm 14 years old, a year later, and I'm reading the New York Times, I'm watching CNN, and suddenly I see that the whole world is against Israel because of settlements, which we know that no such thing. They're legal Jewish communities, talking about how we apparently stole land from Arabs, how apparently all Jews are European, news to you and your family, right? Your family never stepped foot, in Europe in terms of
Huh.
living there.
Yeah. Yeah,
Right.
no.
I didn't know. Like, you tell me, by the way, let me ask you a question and maybe for the audience too. So you mentioned in your introduction that you are Sephardic,
Yeah.
but are you Mizrahi, or like how does
Shami.
the
Yeah.
term
Shami.
Mishami? Okay, so
Yeah.
how is the term used? Because I know in Israel now they're blending Mizrahi and Sephardic Jews to just say Sephardim.
Mizrahi means east, right? Eastern.
Right.
um, Middle Eastern,
Hmm.
right? Middle Eastern areas where, after the Spanish Inquisition, many Jews went off to Europe and the rest of us went down to the Arab countries.
Right.
All four of my grandparents are from Beirut.
Okay.
Uh, so,
So
but
would
my
you say,
parents are both born in America, but their
right?
parents were all born in Beirut. My husband's parents were all born, his grandparents were all born in Syria. In our community in Brooklyn, in New York, and in Jersey in the summers, um, they're all pretty much either Halab
Hmm.
or Shami Jews.
Yeah.
Right? So they're either Egyptian and Turkish, or they're um, Syrian,
Mhm.
Lebanese. But it's really all, there's some differences,
Right.
but not with regard to their Judaism. It's
Mhm.
strictly a cultural difference.
I
Uh,
see. Mhm.
but that's really
And we'll
all.
get into a little bit more too, because like I know like now it's more in favor to, of course, celebrate, and amplify, Sephardic voices and Mizrahi voices, because in America the dominant Jewish community is Ashkenaz. And so I did not even know any non-Ashkenaz Jews when I was growing up. Like to me, I thought that all Jews were Russian. And then I was a little bit confused. I was like, okay, so I'm Russian, but I'm also German, but I'm also
Well,
Lithuanian. And
I grew up also in Florida. I grew up in South Florida. All of my friends, most of my friends, not all of them, but most of my friends were Jewish, and they were all Ashkenaz Jews as
Mhm,
well. Um, I only knew something was different because whenever we had relatives visiting from New York,
mhm,
they were all speaking Arabic. And I, all of my friends' grandparents were speaking Yiddish.
right.
So I knew that there was and our food was very different.
Much
I
better food.
personally think it's better, but our food was very different. And all of my friends and their parents used to love to come to our house, and whenever my parents had a party or something, because
Mm,
our food was just so yummy. But it comes from the culture of the Mizrahi, the Middle Eastern
right.
countries. Kibbeh,
Mhm,
example, is a Syrian, Lebanese, Arab
mhm,
food that we also we adapted and
mhm,
also have it. But we don't really have matzo ball soup. We would have lentil soup.
mhm.
So it's just differences in culture, really.
So let me ask, like, I guess a follow-up question, just from my knowledge too, and hopefully for the audience, those who might not know. So Mizrahi Jews, or those who call themselves Mizrahi, right? They're the ones who experience the diaspora. Obviously, like, we are all from Israel, but then they experience the diaspora in the Arab colonized countries, right? But never went up to Europe. So in your family, did your ancestor, or not ancestor, but did people in your family, did they come to the Arab lands from Sepharad, or were they always
No, originally my
like,
grandmother. I mean, I don't have any written proof or anything, but I could tell you that my grandmother, who I was very close to, um, she told me that her parents told her that their relatives, their ancestors all came from Spain.
okay, so
So,
that makes sense why you say that you're Sephardi. Okay, okay, because like there's still, because last night I went to dinner with a friend. She's Taimanim. She's a Yemenite Jew, and
right.
so her family. So she says like I'm Mizrahi, Mizrahi, because like her family never had that experience in Sepharad, and obviously not in Ashkenaz. And so for the audience who is into genetics, a fun fact that I just learned about a year and a half ago is that all Ashkenaz Jews actually stem from Sephardim. It was 20,000 Italian Jews who first entered the Ashkenaz region, and then they were later joined by other Sephardim. So if any Ashkenaz Jew really delves into their genetic testing, like I did, I had three genetic tests, all of them.
I've been talking about doing it. I want to get it done. I just want
We're
to.
going to talk off record which ones to use because it's a whole explanation. So once you run your raw DNA through this program, we'll talk about it off camera. Anyway, so I found out that I'm 92% Ashkenaz and 8% Sephardic, and I was so excited
Oh,
because
yeah.
that's true.
Arabic.
We're all connected, and that's what you were talking about. That we're all one people. We're from this origination point. We have this responsibility to ourselves, and to me, and of course, like right now we're going through. We're not out of it. Like there's a war. There was a Jewish genocide. I'm still feeling guilt ridden that I don't know if you know this. I was in Israel in during Sukkot of last year, and I came back on October 6th. No idea what was going to happen
No way of knowing. Yeah.
at all.
No way.
And so
Yeah.
what was ironic is that and I hate to say this, but it's just reality. I've been to Israel 7 times. 6 of those trips before this last one all had terrorist attacks of some magnitude, like in Judea and Samaria, down south.
When are you going next? No, I'm just kidding.
Hopefully soon. But the thing was, to me, that week of Sukkot, for those who don't know, Sukkot is such a joyous holiday, and those who spend it in Israel, the whole country. I came when there was such political division, right? There was those protests for judicial reform, against judicial reform. I didn't
Mm.
know if I was going to be flying into a Jewish civil war. And we've had Jewish
Right.
civil wars in ancient history, so it's nothing new.
Sure, of
I
course.
literally didn't know like what I was getting myself into. And I was shocked. Everyone got along. I didn't know who was on the left, who was on the right. I was going to different sukkahs every night with different friends. This it was like suspended from reality. That's how I felt. Like, in America, like you feel like pretty much entrenched in reality. I live in New York. Like you mentioned, crime is up. I'll also add, since I still live here, Mayor Adams, I think, is doing an even worse job, if possible, than de Blasio. I just got 5 notifications this morning on my Citizens app that there were stabbings all in my neighborhood. And I live by Central Park in a nice area called Columbus Circle.
Let's hope that people wake
Yeah,
up and start,
exactly. So,
la
so
la land idea of progressivism is just an unbelievably horrible left turn that people are making.
and,
And
and around the world, like, we see like what's going on in England and in Canada, and we'll get into some politics of Israel a little bit later on in our conversation. Safety, it's very easy to achieve with the right policies and not caving to the mobs that want otherwise. But anyway, so like, so here I live in reality. Like, I've been to Israel. Like, I've experienced, like the awful, terrorism attacks. Well, not like personally, but on the news when I was there. That week, there were no terrorist attacks. It was so safe. I remember even trying to convince my friend if we can go to Arab neighborhoods in the
oh,
east portion.
Lori,
I I was so, I'll confess, I don't know if you followed my social media posts before the war. I was very pro-Arab. I was signed on to the Abraham Accords. I went to Dubai in 2022. My mom and I went all over the Arab world. We went to Egypt and Jordan and Saudi Arabia.
oh, it was a hopeful moment.
It was a hopeful moment.
It
And
really
and I realized,
to
okay,
get it back.
right, hopefully.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so I really wanted to, and also like, I'll be honest, my family is not Mizrahi, right? Like we're Ashkenaz. So it's interesting how, and I want to get your perspective on this because when I have Jews who tell me I'm going to Germany, I'm going to Poland, I bristle inside because that's where my family was murdered, right? Like their blood is filled, has filled the soil of Poland. Like I remember my grandfather, before he passed away, made us promise never to step foot in Poland because it's where his entire family was not murdered by Nazis. They were all murdered by locals, by Ukrainians in Lvov, like just dumped into ravines. So to me, some of Europe is just this murderous landscape, right?
Yeah.
But when the Abraham Accords were beginning to formulate, to me was, oh my gosh, is this happening in my lifetime? I want to experience this. Maybe there is hope because we're a hopeful bunch. But I did get pushback from a lot of Mizrahi Jews because their family obviously faced discrimination, in
Yes,
those lands. So,
but I'm an optimist.
so I was going to say, what was your like when you hear Jews
I was
were going
happy.
to
I was
Dubai?
when it was happening and the Accords were really starting to take hold. You know, both of us have a mutual friend in Rabbi Abadi.
Yes.
Um, and Rabbi Abadi is he went there to put together the Jewish community. There were a
Mhm.
lot of Jews all over the UAE. He brought them all together and made a community and school and synagogue for them and everything. But I was hopeful that we could finally start to sow some of the seeds needed,
Mhm.
grow a respectful relationship, a mutually respectful relationship where we honor each other's um, backgrounds, histories, and also what we also have in common. And I mean, there is really so much in common with as a Sephardic Jew, we have a lot in common with the Arabs. Um, Mostly culture,
Right.
obviously culture, but it's other things too, like just the way we think and the way we act and the way we, sometimes even the way we look, we're darker skinned,
Right.
it,
And
it's
we are Middle Eastern. We are Middle Eastern people. That's what a lot of people
right,
forget. Like Jews are
right. So,
from the land.
right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, But look, we've had this 4-year pause put on everything. Let's hope to God that that goes away and we bring President Trump back into office and we can reignite what today would be an unbelievable existence of opportunity and friendship between America, the Jewish people, and the Arab countries. Hopefully, over the next 4 years, we can reignite that and bring it back to where it should be, and keep it moving forward. That's.
And so are you as hopeful? Because again, like I probably could, no one probably was more pro-Arab before the genocide than I was. Like I was sharing Arab music and I was about to
Ken,
jobs.
you're talking about the culture. You're not talking about their hate, the
No,
way
of course
some
not.
of the countries,
Right.
bring their kids up to hate Jews, others do not. It depends on.
Right. I guess like collectively, like I remember like when I went with my mom to like Egypt and Jordan and especially to Saudi Arabia, I got so much pushback, like, oh my gosh, like how like and again, and it happened like not just from Jews, but Ashkenaz too. It's like, oh, like they were killing us for so many years. Like, how could you? October 7th for me completely changed my outlook. And it's still like, I still defend CC for various reasons. He did so much against Hamas that I don't think is out in the Jewish media. Whatever issues he's working out right now with Netanyahu, my own personal opinion, I think there are reasons behind that. I'm not going to get into it here. We can get into it like off record. But for example, like, okay, so Saudi Arabia to me disappointed me, right? Because they were on the fast track to having peace with Israel.
Well, again, they
Right.
were confident of it.
But then I also
remember we had a change of power in America. They went along. They had to go along with that. I just I'm like I keep saying, I'm hopeful. I just believe that it's going to come back around. I think that God has taught us all a lesson. Really, Laureen, I think that he's shown us the bad side. And I think there's going to be a lot of people. I have family members, not a lot, a few family members that are hard left thinkers. But they called me and told me they're voting for Trump, not because they like him, but because they don't like what happened to the Democrat Party. And they don't like what's going on in Israel. They don't like what has happened to the neighboring Arab countries with regard to a relationship to Israel and the rest of the world. And they want that back. They got a taste of it and they want it back. And I think that that's going to be that middle slice of people that aren't sure which way to go. I think for the Jews, at least, we've got plenty of liberal Jews, and I can't even explain why.
My sister, well, I can. My sister being one of them, she was, she was anti-Israel for not in a way that
I anti-Israel, my sister, but she's liberal. She's a liberal Jew, but she's very pro-Israel. But it's hard, people they don't draw straight lines in the sand. They draw zigzag lines.
And not even understand
anti that.
Right. But also not understanding the policies. So that's the thing, so my sister woke up after October 7th because she was completely devastated is an understatement. We all were, right? Like we were like it just like there's no words to describe like the subhuman nature to do that to another people. And also to me, it's such a disservice when the media, even the Jewish media, will call it a massacre, an attack. It was a Jewish genocide. Like I was sharing with my subscriber,
largest single attack on Jews since the Holocaust. I mean,
right. And it was genocide because, right. And I think we need to start using the terminology like what it was, because especially Jews will say like, oh, but they murdered the Thai farmers and some Bedouins. Of course they murdered not just Jews. However, I can't even call them people, the subhuman terrorists were hunting for Jews. There was a Bedouin farmer who was sharing that 8 Jews ran onto his property. They asked to be hidden. He didn't know what was going on. He's like, well, why are you hiding? And they told him. And so shortly thereafter, this Hamas terror, and by the way, like it's not even Hamas terrorists. The reports were just revealed that 2,200 civilians from Gaza helped Hamas.
Why?
Not even that. It's
They all
80.
got paid. They all got paid well.
But
They
it's
all
also the brainwashing. When you have
fame and
76,
glory for killing Jews and all that. That's
it's in their nature. Take any population. Okay, forget about the Arabs. Any population, like the Nazis, for example. Look what they did with barely 10 years of brainwashing. Now amplify that to almost 80 years of brainwashing. What's happening in Gaza and Judea and Samaria? Like, that the most popular children's game before the war probably still was called Stab a Jew.
yeah,
Every
of course.
children, and they were cheering when they were dragging the dead Jewish bodies. But anyway,
We've
so
all seen the images of kids
exactly.
dressed up in army fatigues with machine guns and
Yeah, like
death
to them, that's reality. And so, like, I also hate like when we go to these rallies and they say like innocent, well, they say Palestinians, so we are Palestinians, like innocent civilians, and it's like no one is innocent. And the hostages that were released in November all said the same thing. Like, we were in the hospitals, the nurses were cheering, the children that were being treated for minor, injuries, they were cheering that they brought in, these Jews as prizes. So the Bedouins were saying that when Hamas came in, or the civilians, or whatever these subhumans are, they were looking for Jews. They were not looking for Bedouins who are genetic Jews in Israel and in Jordan. That's a whole other conversation. They were descended from the Jews who left for the Hijaz after 586 BC. Eventually they made home, but they've been practicing Muslims since the 7th century. And Israel knows which clans are Jews. Many of them helped Israel very much in 48 and 67 in those wars. Anyway, so they all said like they were not hunting for us. They were not hunting for Arab Muslims. They were hunting for Jews. And to me, that woke me up because again, like, I shared, I was in Israel the week prior. And again, I was on this hopeful high. I was like, let's go to an Arab neighborhood. How bad can it be? I have Arab cab drivers here in Israel. We chit chat. We're fine. I felt so safe. And then it was like this brutal reality hit. We're on our own. We only have ourselves to protect. And we need absolute safety in our homeland. And that's also when I started paying attention to politics. Because before, I always tried as a Zionism educator to say, I'm not here to help Israel. I think that's patronizing to say like, oh, we're helping Israel. I'm not here as an advocate for Israel. I feel like Israel doesn't need advocates. Like to me, an advocate, you advocate for the sick, the weak, puppies, right? Like, Israel is a fairly powerful country. And if it really utilizes its powers properly, has one of the strongest armies in the world. So to me, I found what I do as an educator. I'm here to combat anti-Semitism. And I didn't care, not like I didn't care. I didn't want to take sides in a country where I don't pay taxes. I didn't serve in the army. Like I thought that's not my place. But
Right.
what October 7th taught me, oh my gosh, that's my only homeland. And I just realized that the decisions that Israel made throughout the years affects not only Israelis, it affects Jews worldwide. So to me, that was,
Yeah, but remember something,
yeah.
Israelis also let
Mhm.
their guard down somewhat.
No, but
And
that's what I mean. So
right.
so that's why I'm
It
invested in their
wasn't just
politics.
you or Americans or
Yeah.
anything else. It was, Israelis were letting their guard down. There's stories of, the people that were living at that border.
Mhm.
Every Friday, they were flying kites with the Palestinians before Shabbat,
Right. Right.
and flying kites in the name of peace. And so those
Mhm.
same Palestinians that came over and shot and killed them all.
Right.
Hope is important, but it can also be dangerous, and you have to come into hope with your eyes wide open. And I don't think
Mhm.
that um, I I just feel so bad that these people had to die because they were so hopeful.
Exactly. Right. And I
And
think,
they were dancing for peace, and if you just think about, they weren't they weren't just living their own lives and trying to stay away from the border and trying to keep away from the Palestinians. They were
They were
trying
trying
to
to outreach to the border.
outreach and embrace them and love them and show them that they're only full of peace themselves. And but it didn't. It's going to be a very long road back. It's a fact that anti-Semitism has been growing, all around the world, here in America, of course, but also around the world. But somehow, it becomes like a way of life for Jews.
Mm-hmm.
We all know that there's anti-Semitism. How many of us, sometimes we're in a room full of people, or we're in a place where we're not sure if Jews will be accepted. If we're wearing our Megan David, we might our shirt, or we take off our kippah, or whatever they do.
Yeah.
People are doing it because they're trying to protect themselves, because the reality is, as hopeful as you want to be, the danger is there. It's around the corner. It goes back. It's anti-Semitism is the world's oldest hate. It's the oldest form of hate. And unfortunately, it's expected. And when October 7th came, all that hope that they had went right out the window. Everything changed. I have a son-in-law who has a cousin who was one of the hostages taken.
Oh my gosh.
And she was let out after, I think it was 55 or 56 days.
The November deal. Yeah.
She was only let out by mistake. They actually had the name of some other girl that was supposed to be let out, but there was so much chaos and things going on at the moment that one of the guys there, the soldiers or whatever you want to call them, the Palestinians, said, "You go," and just sent her
Just
with
so random. It was
she just got out alive by total sheer luck.
Is she sharing any of her story yet? Or
Is that I know about it. She actually came to speak. We had President Trump here last month in New Jersey for a fundraiser, and she came and she spoke and she told her story. She was so poignant. She was so beautiful. She told such a strong and uplifting story. But her one biggest message was, we can love other people, but we have to also love ourselves and care about ourselves first, take care of ourselves and our families, and never let your guard down.
Absolutely. And I heard
that lesson, and personally, I've strengthened my resolve. It's both a professional and a personal feeling, but it goes hand in hand. You want to be hopeful, you want to believe that people are good and people will appreciate and love what Jewish people could do for the world, what they have done for the world, and many do. Get me wrong. But there is the loud, dangerous minority of people that are always there, always at our footstep, our heels, and are ready to kill us for no reason. And so I just have to believe that, ultimately Hashem will endure. Torah proves that, right? Time and time again over the last, whatever it is, 5,785 years, I think, that Jews somehow survive. I believe we will survive and move forward in a stronger way with more resolve and more strength after what happened in October 7th. Will there be more October 7th? I hope not, but we can never let our guard down.
You bring up so many great points. Is that the hope aspect? I've done so much research since October 7th about our ancestors. Our proud Judean ancestors. And I believe, not to put you on the spot, but I believe you're on my newsletter listserv. So I don't know if you, and I know you're so busy, but if you have not had a chance to read it yet, I did a very long form piece about the 3 Jewish Roman wars that were fought, right? Everything was stacked against Jews. Of course, we were defeated each and every time, and I think it's important for the audience, for any audience to understand, any Jewish audience especially, there was no real anti-Semitism before the advent of Christianity. Everyone was fighting everyone for territory. The Arameans were fighting Jews, the Jews were fighting other tribes, we subjugated other tribes, we expanded our land. We literally originated from the hill country of Canaan, Judea and Samaria, look at the map of Israel today. How did we get that? It was not magic, right? Like we expanded our territory. And if you look at what happened to us, like at one point, I believe it was during the siege of Jerusalem, right?
Yeah.
500 Jews per day were being crucified in the hills of Judea and Samaria per day. And this went on for a year. But each time, Jews in our small numbers, we fought back with vigilance. The second Jewish-Roman War was actually fought by the diaspora Jews. We did a lot of damage. I'm not going to get into details. People can read about the Kitos War. We attacked. We decimated. So we come like we're not a murderous bunch, but in our culture, what's that concept that our ancestors lived by, rise and kill first before being killed, right? So you have to identify your enemy, know that if you yourself, your family, your community as a whole,
It's commanded in the Torah.
exactly.
Kill or
And
be killed, you kill.
my rabbi even says this. I have a Chabad rabbi, and he shares what the Rebbe said. And I didn't know any of this, before October 7th, because we have this bastardized version coming from liberal Jews, mostly tikkun olam, right? We're the light into the world. We repair the world. And some of it, yes, like, we do want to make the world better, but at what expense, right? Like we have to
It
leave
can't be at
ourselves
our own
first.
expense.
Exactly. So,
Jews make up less than half of 1% of the world's population. If you think of that in terms of bullies and the new kid on the block, the new kid or the young kid or the little scrawny
right.
kid, we're the little scrawny kid.
Mhm.
Bullies can pick on us and it's easy to do that. It doesn't, but what they don't understand is that it doesn't make them any more important or better. In fact, I think it reduces the level of respect worldwide that people have for them. The only difference is they're just crazy enough to continue killing and trying to decimate our population.
And also, I have to add this to interject, the more I read and research, we're not that special in terms of being killed by Muslims. Like, I had no idea that the Hindus were far more targeted by sheer numbers. I think it was something like over 200 million Hindus over 800 years were killed by Muslim rulers. We don't know about that. Like, we don't know what's going on right now in Bangladesh. The Hindus are being genocided over there. Villages are being burned, but our media does not cover that. Even the Jewish media
It
barely
doesn't
cover
serve
that.
them to cover that. How
Right.
does it serve their agenda, their
Mhm.
Democrat progressive agenda? It does not. That's why they don't
Right.
cover it.
Right.
But Jews were so easy to pick on, I mean, come on, every little thing we do, or, all the stereotypes. We're money hungry, we're cheap, we're this, we're that, we're all it's
It's a two-pronged approach, right? Because we have one form of anti-Semitism, the Christian
hard to be
anti-Semitism.
Jewish. It's a
Yeah.
wonderful honor to be
It's
Jewish.
such an honor. Would you, okay, let me ask you a
It's
question, because
hard.
I
It's
said this
hard.
to someone the other day. They said like, oh, like it's terrible to be Jewish. And I said, I would not want to be any other ethnicity and
It's
faith.
not.
I would be sad if someone
Right.
said tomorrow you're going to be, I don't know, French. I would cry. And
You know
no,
what? But Judaism is of course the foundation of who I am. But there really are such good people in the world. Let's be
right.
careful to make sure that we say this because it is 100% true.
Oh, no, of
There
course. I'm
are
just saying for
so many
myself.
non-Jews
Right.
that are wonderful, very, very good people. They're good to each other. They're good to Jews. They're good. They try, they want to help. They want to strengthen the Jewish
Mhm.
population, keep us safe as well. I think that a lot of recognition goes to, people like Donald Trump,
Mhm.
uh, who have done so much for Israel, so much
Right.
for the Jewish people here in America. Trump's inclusion of the Jews as a race under the Civil
Mhm.
Rights Act, Title VI, for example. These are things that we need to always remind each other and the world of
Mhm.
that
Oh,
we're
absolutely.
not in
Absolutely.
this alone, and a lot of other peoples
Mhm.
in the world have stood by our side. over the years.
Oh,
And
no, absolutely. And actually right now I praise a lot of Arab Zionists because they're, obviously vilified by their own communities. I was just at an FIDF fundraiser in the Hamptons last month, and Mossab Youssef, those who know him, I guess more by the movie that came out about him, The Green Prince, right? Like he worked for Israel as an undercover agent against his own father, who co-founded Hamas. He completely owned the interview. Like the interviewer, she was a nice woman, but she kept saying like, "Oh, the Palestinians and the Jews." He took her microphone and said, "There's no such thing as Palestinians relating to Arabs." He said, "You and you and you're Palestinians. You need to know your history." Like he's educating Jews that a lot of Jews like don't know ourselves.
I like to call them so-called Palestinians.
And I know because and if with all due respect,
Yeah,
so
no, it's okay.
yeah,
I
yeah,
know. It's just like,
yeah.
what are they? They call themselves Palestinians, but they're really not.
No,
You
so there, okay, if we're going to be historically accurate, and I think it's time, especially after genocide, that we are, more Jews need to say it. So the Arabs in Gaza are mostly Egyptians. Like Egypt resettled 250,000
know?
of their nationals in 48 and radicalized them. Some former Israeli Arabs joined in only to help the Arab armies kill Jews faster. That was the only reason they fled into Gaza.
Yeah.
The Black people we see there, they came in as slaves of the Egyptians because slavery did not end in the Middle East until the 60s.
Right.
Some Saudis came in, not for malevolent reasons, by the way. It just Saudi Arabia is so close to Gaza. They just saw an opportunity, another Arab land there. So I don't blame the Saudis. So here you have a society, those are Arab occupiers in Jewish Gaza. That's our land. Legally to this day, per Article 80, Gaza is still Jewish land. And the ones in Judea and Samaria, the ones who are not genetically Jewish, there's about 30-40% of Arabs in Judea and Samaria that are people. They were converted by an Egyptian caliph in the 11th century. Fun fact, before the Jordanian occupation, there was not one mosque in all of Judea and Samaria except for Al-Aqsa. So when King Hussein I came in to survey the land before he occupied it, he had a building frenzy of mosques because he knew if we're going to occupy this land and lie that this is Palestinian
Mhm.
and Jordanian, we need to have mosques here. If all these
We
Muslims
need to
live here,
Arabize it.
exactly. So that's the thing. It's like I call the one, and by the way, they have nothing to do with each other, right? So the ones in Judea and Samaria, they're resettled Jordanians who are Jordanians. 65% of them are former Israeli Arabs. They come from 25 different Muslim nations. They also fled to Jordan for one reason, to help Arab armies kill Jews faster. Then we have the Arab occupiers in Gaza. I mean, sometimes depends on the publication, depends on who I'm talking to. I'll say Gazans. The ones, if we don't want to be historically honest and say Arab occupiers, I call the ones in Judea and Samaria Arabs under PA rule. That's it. That explains everything. Now, the Arabs who stayed behind in Israel, I call them Israeli Arabs because they did not leave for whatever reason, we don't know.
Right.
But
Business.
whatever reason, they did not leave to
Yeah.
help Arab armies kill Jews faster. So I have them, even though they're still from the same 25 different, Muslim nations. So, and look, and they're part of society. Like on my website before, I obviously created before October 7th, I had deep conversations with a partner I had at the time, and we were debating like how to present. We're talking about the Circassians, they're Muslims, not anti-Semitic. Most of the Muslims who serve in the IDF are Circassians. The Ottomans brought them in through the Balkans. Glad that they did that.
You've got so much information. You need
Yeah.
to look.
I would love to. No, so like I was just saying, so just because someone is Muslim in Israel does not mean that they're an enemy, or
Right.
even not all Israeli Arabs, right? Like 40% of 40% of the medical industry in Israel is Arabs. So if
Yeah.
they all just were kicked out and left, it would be devastating for Israel, right? So we know, like we've been to Israel, we know not all Arabs within Israel are bad. But like you mentioned, um, with your family member who's connected to a former hostage. I've been to talks with former hostages and also survivors of the genocide. And they said before October 7th, we were so hopeful and peace loving. And of course, all of them, I mean, I don't know all, but the ones I've, heard speak, they said, we now know the truth. There is no peace with those, and they don't mean like all Arabs, but he said there is no peace with those who kill you. And that's the thing. Like when I was in Egypt, I saw the other side of it because what Egypt did, they have not just a fence, they have three walls. One of them a steel wall that they demanded the US pay for.
Right.
Didn't ask, but demanded. What Sisi did in 2014, for the audience that might not know, when Morsi came in before Sisi. So Morsi was a Muslim Brotherhood terrorist, and he was the one who let Hamas run amok in the Sinai. So in 2012, Hamas killed 16 Egyptian soldiers. Morsi did nothing. He probably celebrated. 2014, Sisi gets in with the help of Mossad because Israel did not want ISIS next door. So brought in or helped Sisi get to power. First thing he did, besides have his henchmen kill most of the Brotherhood members, and then the rest eventually got put in. The ones who survived are rotting in prisons, real prisons that they have, by the way, in Egypt, and not the kind ones that we have and Israel has. But he destroyed 1,200 tunnels in Rafah. He also bombed his army, bombed 3,000 buildings in Rafah, and then expanded the buffer zone. And then since then, and I remember reading about this in the New York Times. So if I know about it, Israel should know that there were tunnels. He was flooding so many tunnels with sewage. So now,
Wow.
so now when, a lot of Jews are saying like, oh my gosh, like Egypt should have told us about the tunnels in Rafah. I knew about the tunnels in Rafah. Like, how did they not know? So my point is this: that when I was in Egypt, not one Egyptian that we spoke with, and it was many, had any hope or any even want of peace with their own brothers in Gaza. To them, they were terrorists. They didn't want one back. They still don't. You see how hard Sisi is like fighting to keep that border sealed shut.
Right.
They have no delusion of peace. Like to them, okay, like we cleaned up terrorism in our country. By the way, Egypt was super safe. There were so many checkpoints everywhere. It
Yeah.
feels like a fortress, but it's needed. Sometimes you have to do things to root out evil. So Sisi
Absolutely.
succeeded. Sisi succeeded. So for him, Gaza was then, so he thought, okay, so our terrorism problem is solved. Now it's on you, Israel, if you so choose. And that's the thing. To me, Israel did not, all they had to do was copy and paste what Egypt was doing. Not one work permit was given to any Gazan from Egypt. Not one Egyptian was giving rides to the Gazans to hospitals.
Nobody wanted them. Nobody wanted the
But
Gazans.
no, but that's the thing. Like, it wasn't even like I was talking to the Egyptians. They said it wasn't even a concept to us to drive them to our hospitals. They said they have 36 hospitals. Why are we driving them to hospitals? You know, so they knew the reality. And so I can also, having been to the Arab countries, I'm not saying they're all good, but especially Egypt, again, he doesn't love Israel, but he probably is now wondering too, why didn't Bibi copy and paste what we were doing? No work permits, border sealed shut. Oh, and their border crossing was closed 11 months out of the year, except for Ramadan. And I remember being, this is so ironic, 2022 in Israel also. I went to Arab countries and in Israel, same year. And they brought us to the Eris crossing. And the director there was lamenting, Rebecca, lamenting that not enough Gazans were being given work permits. I think it was 40,000. He wanted 100,000. And everyone in my tour group was, clapping. Yeah, we need more work. I'm sitting there aghast. I'm like, how do you, what, do you not realize like what you're letting in? But no one
Right.
was thinking that.
Takes those jobs away from Israelis, from Jews.
Right. Not only that, but like you're letting in your enemy, right? Like, think about like, oh, the
Again,
workers.
it's they're guilty of hope.
Exactly. This whole Tikkun Olam. So, I mean, I can't even say anything good will come from this because
From
the
October 7th,
100, yeah, like there's nothing by
except maybe there is an added level of precaution now. And
exactly. So hopefully we're finally seeing that
Yeah.
It's not hope and wings that's going to save us, that's going to prevent future genocide. It's actual policies. And it's
Yeah.
not that dissimilar to what we're seeing here in America, right? So, like, in here, we're like, oh, like, there's anti-Semitism rising and there's crime rising, but who's in charge, right? And so, what I really admired what you did, and this is going to talk about CASEPAC because everyone needs to know about CASEPAC. So this was 2019. Again, correct me, 2018, 2019. And I was alarmed by the amount of anti-Semitic assaults that were going on in Brooklyn. Like I remember contacting different organizations, like, oh my gosh, like what's being done about this, contacting everyone. So I felt like as a whole, our community was just, including myself at the time, we were complaining, we were being sad about the situation, angry. You were the one who decided to do something about it. And you created CasePac. So could you share with the audience, did you have some kind of inflection point where you decided, okay, enough is enough. I need to start this organization and take it to a federal level?
Well, it's the opposite.
Okay.
I had gotten involved in politics prior, um, and I understood that being a politician gives you a level of power that you ordinarily wouldn't have. I mean, an unrelated story, but just shows you an example, is when I was forming the School for Children with Autism in Brooklyn. My first foray into the world of nonprofits and
Mhm.
trying to raise millions of dollars and all this stuff. There was a Democrat state assemblywoman. Her name was Rhoda Jacobs. She had been in office for something like 30 years. She was the second most powerful, the most powerful woman in New York state politics. And she happened to be the New York State Assemblywoman for the district that I was living in Brooklyn. And it became obvious that it was going to be very difficult to get permits and the money that we needed and the kind of construction we needed. And also, how do we get into who are the right lawyers and who are the right people to get us approved as a school? And when are we going to get our license? And we had all these kids and we didn't have a school, but we needed the school. I went over and I sat down with her. We clicked right away. She understood immediately the need.
Mhm.
And I can tell you that exactly 1 year later, we had our school open.
Wow.
And our school is now 20 years old.
And it's
And
still in existence.
it still exists in
Incredible.
Brooklyn. And we are now moving into, we're building and going to be moving into a $17 million building. It's unbelievable. So my point is that I learned early on that politicians are in a position of power,
Mhm.
whether you like them or not.
Right.
Some you like, some you don't.
It's just reality. Yeah.
Right, it's just reality. So you work with what you have.
Mhm.
Anti-Semitism in 2019 and all at that time it was absolutely getting to be an unbelievably difficult situation. And there are many organizations that are fighting on anti-Semitism, as we know. And like you said before, every letter of the alphabet, and it's all out there. So I thought, why don't I figure out how to work with elected officials?
Mhm.
And maybe if I support and endorse federally elected officials, I would have their ear and they could learn what's going on from my point of view and from the point of view of my board members, and do something about it. And so CASEPAC, which stands for, it's an acronym, Combat Anti-Semitism Everywhere Political Action Committee,
Mhm.
PAC, was born on the idea that politicians can make a difference in a positive way if you give them the opportunity to do so. So we only work with federally elected officials, not state level.
Mhm.
It's at the federal level. And we have worked together with many over the years, including Congresswoman Nicole Maliotakis, Max Miller, Claudia Tenney, Elise Stefanik, Byron Donald, President Trump, many different elected officials over the years. And it has really helped. And what happens is when there, not always, but many times when there is an issue or a bill coming up for a vote that affects Israel or affects what's going on, how would it affect the Jewish world here in America? Either I get a call from one of the congressmen or senators, or I call them, and I have their ear, and it's an important relationship because it's an honest one, and I think it has made a difference. But that's really where we are. We have our own lane that we stay in. We're not trying to solve every problem with anti-Semitism because that's just too big for any organization. But we're nonpartisan. So I will talk to anyone who is in a position of power that can make a decision on behalf of American Jews and on behalf of the state of Israel that would help us in a positive way. I'm happy to talk to them.
Perfect. That's so needed and very impressive.
Right. So I mean, we've called out anti-Semitism, we've called out anti-Zionism, we've called out anti-Israel bias.
Which is one and the same, of course.
Right. But everybody has their own definitions.
Right.
And we operate on the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, which is pretty much the gold standard of, toward identifying what anti-Semitism is in all of its forms. But unfortunately, the UN still has not accepted this definition.
May I ask a clarifying question just for my own knowledge? Did the IHRA, did they update to include anti-Semitism meaning anti-Zionism, like anti-Israel?
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay.
That was up for discussion. I think it is.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay, just wanted to make sure.
I want to say yes.
Because initially, just to be forthright with you, when IHRA first was circulating many, many moons ago, I was actually against it because I thought that it was so concentrating on Holocaust era anti-Semitism and was not reflective of what makes up the bulk of Jew hate today. But I trust you, and
you know what?
I'll change my mind.
Maureen, Jew hatred is Jew hatred. It doesn't matter why. It just matters.
Right.
It is what it is. If you bruised your arm, does it really matter how it got there? The fact is you have a bruise.
Exactly. But at the same time,
it has to heal and takes time and it takes a lot of work. And that's what CASEPAC is really all about. And all of these organizations, I don't agree or align with 100% of everything that everybody's doing. But the point is they are trying, and you have to keep another goal, I would say, of CASEPAC and many of the other organizations really is to keep the fact that anti-Semitism is so prevalent top of mind. That has to stay top of mind because the minute that gets swept under the rug, or the minute everybody starts to think, it's not so bad anymore, which is what happened this summer, right? At the summer, right before the summer, we had all that horrible protesting and anti-Israel protesting going on all the college campuses, right? And then school let out. So it all went away, right? Interestingly enough, but not surprisingly, it came right back when school started again. And if you look at Columbia University and what's going on, and some of these other schools, it's just as bad as it was, and it's going to continue.
It's going to be even worse because
it's going to be even worse.
Even it doesn't matter if all of the chancellors resign, their replacements are coming from the same infected pot. It really is because Operation Safe, and that's the thing too, so you mentioned, I will push back respectfully a little bit about a lot of these organizations. I don't believe that most of these organizations are waking up in the morning thinking, how do we act in an anti-Israel fashion? Of course not. I think I've been on the boards of many of these organizations. They have great intention. They truly believe that they're doing great, that they're trying to make inroads. Problem is that the terminology that they're using, A lot of them are upholding like I'm not going to name the organization that I'm in talks with right now, but they were so proud of their resource guides. And I went through their resource guides with their education team. And I said, so West Bank is a Jordanian occupation term from 1950. Settlements, it's it's literally playing in the hands of anti-Israel haters who think that you are settling a foreign land, uh,
Right.
saying that the UN that the
You
UN
know, that's a
Israel.
lesson that you could give to some of these news channels, NBC, ABC, CNN, you name it.
If you have a connection, I would love it.
Oh my
That's the
goodness.
thing,
I
and
mean,
that's the thing, and that's the thing,
really.
and that's the thing. Like a lot of Jews don't understand. Like, I again live in
People
Midtown.
that are non-Jews that don't really pay attention, don't know all the history that you know, don't
That
get it.
and that's the thing. I was anti-Israel for 20 years. I'm a Jew. Anti-Israel for 20 years. I cannot tell you and everyone else. And I remember when I even admitted this, it was the first time I said it out loud and I had to take a breath back. I was being featured on JBS's Eye in Israel with Shahar Azani. He's incredible. And
Yeah.
so he asked a question. He's like, oh, so when you were anti-Israel and you had all these non-Jewish, mostly non-Jewish friends, were you spreading anti-Semitic lies? And I had to think about that. Like, of course, like I knew that I was, but I never articulated that. I never admitted out loud I was for 20 years. And so I guarantee you and the audience, and I come from that other mindset. I know for a fact that half the people we see marching in the streets, these pro-Hamas terrorists, they're not anti-Jew. They're really not. They look at their liberal Jewish friends who, by the way, are marching with them, many of them, like, the Jews of If Not Now and JVP, some of them from J Street, and they say like, oh, I love my Jewish friend. My Jewish friend hates Israel. Like, there's no problem with them. But it's not that they are anti-Semitic. They're misinformed. And I say
Yeah.
this to a lot of Jewish organizations. I remember being at Columbia. I was there for grad school. You and I actually graduated from the same program. And I mean, now I want nothing to do with that school, and I reject all of the requests for donations, and I tell them
Oh,
exactly.
I love it when they
Yeah,
call.
me too, and I
Oh,
tell them exactly why.
makes my day. To the point where they finally say, "Okay, I'll tell my superior," and they hang up.
Right. No, but I saw this firsthand. So when I was an undergrad, I graduated 2004 from American University. There was none of this nonsense because, first of all, I was in business school for undergrad. We didn't talk about anything geopolitical. And the Hillel on campus was very strong. So I remember there was one, I don't know, pro-terrorist protest by the Muslim Student Association. Within minutes, Hillel is on our small quad. On the quad, showed up in great numbers, strong with information, pushed they left. That's it. Like that counter protest, I think lasted for 10 minutes. Now, fast forward to when I went into grad school. And again, our grad program, I don't know when you were there, but when I was there, no one mentioned Israel. There was no politics. It was just enhancing your career, right? So like whatever you're learning, and here's how to take to the next level. But I had to take some classes during the day, during some of the semesters, and I saw Apartheid Week. And here's where we, not you and CASEPAC, which is why CASEPAC needs to, be celebrated and seen honestly as an example of what to do. So there was Apartheid Week where the students were stealing pictures of dead Syrian children from the Syrian civil war. On the other hand, you had SSI. And by the way, I had conversations with Elon, so we're not gossiping. Everything's out in the open. SSI was tabling across the way, and all that they were doing was screaming "Humus, not Hamas" over and
Hummus?
over again. "Humus, not Hamas." Great slogan, does not do anything because, and I saw this again right there as a bystander. The students walking by, most of them non-Jewish, never thought about Israel, never thought about God, like none of that. They're walking by. What do they see? They're seeing the image of dead children. Their heartstrings are awakened, right? Are stirred.
Yeah.
And they're here Jews saying, Humus not Hamas. Are you kidding me? And that's the thing. It's like we don't know as collectively how to effectively push back. So when I go to
Right.
these
Yeah.
rallies, and that's the thing, when I go to these rallies and the pro terrorists are screaming free Gaza, why am I the only one who's pushing back and saying Jews freed Gaza? I mean, sorry, free Palestine, Jews freed Palestine.
Go check your history.
Jews freed Palestine in 48. When someone tells me out in the streets or at a coffee shop, I had that experience a couple of weeks ago, that they're Palestinian, I say, congratulations, I did not know that you're a genetic Jew. That makes them think. Of course, like they push back, like, what are you talking about? And Palestinians said, really, where did your great grandparents actually come from? What is your last name? Let me actually go on Google and check
Right.
your last name, because your last name tells me exactly which country that your family comes from.
That's right.
Right. But like having these rallies with bringing them
That there is something there of what
yeah,
you're saying, and that is that I
like
don't know of a real strong education campaign.
that's the thing. And that's what's missing.
Any of these nonprofits or PACs, even, mine or anything, where is the education campaign for the average American
That's the
to
thing. So they're
understand
not
what it's all
right.
about?
Right. And that's the thing. So we like
That's what we need.
I read so many articles like, oh, like there's so many people who actually hate you. I disagree. I think that so many of it is misinformation, or even if we look on the news, like I had a meeting yesterday with this a young gentleman who's a content creator, and he's so of course disgusted by what's going on, and I told him not to have empathy. Of course, like none of these people who are protesting deserve any empathy, trust me, but it's important for us as a people to understand the mindset of the other side in order
Agree.
right in
Yeah.
order for us to see what we're up against and how to fix it. So again, like you with CASEPAC, you went straight to the federal level. And by the way, I wanted to ask you, for a while now, when you first formed CASEPAC, how did those meetings even come, like how was it to just enter the space with what you were doing?
Um,
That's so impressive.
oh boy, you caught me off guard. I
Yes.
don't remember
Sorry.
now. It's gonna come to me in a minute. Who is the president of the RJC? What's his name? Senator. He was a
Matt,
senator.
oh, Coleman.
Yeah.
Coleman. Yeah.
So we met with him first. And he was just awesome. Gave us I explained to him what we're doing. He loved it and was very, very generous with names and contacts and helped us to move forward. I went to APAC. I met with the top people at APAC. In other words, what I did is I said, let me go to all the big top, went to AJC, RJC, APAC, all of them, they're all in Washington, they all have their main offices in Washington. So we went to Washington and I met in a series of 3 or 4 days, all of them,
Wow.
and told them, laid out my plan and what I wanted to do. Because first of all, I wanted them to understand I'm not stepping on their toes, which is an
Right.
important thing.
It really is. Right.
And also it would have been a wasted effort if I was stepping on their toes. You don't need two people doing the same thing.
No, no, of course not.
Right.
Yeah.
So I wanted them first to understand I'm not their enemy, I'm their friend. But also more importantly, I needed their support, their contacts, their help. They were very forthcoming and very helpful. It was great. So that's how I got started. I just said, let me do that. Also, I just started reaching out to my local New York congressmen and senators. Nicole Maliotakis was the first one.
Wow.
And she was running, actually, she was running for
Was that when she was running for mayor or Congress?
should see, I think she ran for,
Because she ran for,
first she ran for Congress and she lost. So she ran for mayor and lost, and then she ran for Congress.
that's how I met her on her mayoral campaign.
Yeah,
And then
yeah.
I know she was running.
So, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Was she running for Congress? Yeah, when I was running, that's how I knew her. That's how I met her. She was a New York State Assemblywoman.
Oh,
And
yes, that's
she
right.
was running for Congress the year that I was running for New York State Assembly.
Oh,
And we did a fundraiser together.
Mhm.
It was a lot of fun. We both showed up in almost the same red dress. It was really funny. It was a big luncheon.
Mhm.
But she was great. We clicked right away, and we campaigned together. We also, during our campaign, we both, at different times and in different places, we both broke our foot. And so we have a picture of the two of us standing in the rain with casts on our foot and crutches on the other arm, handing out palm cards to people in the rain. So we bonded. And she's been terrific. She has been really a role model,
Mhm.
I would say, for our community when it comes to demonstrating how important it is to have a powerful voice and what you can do with it. And she's been really strong, and she's been voting on all the bills in the right way. And she just put forth two anti-Semitism bills herself, and which I could send to you.
Okay,
Um,
please
and
do.
she's doing great. She's doing great. And and she's the congresswoman for my Sephardic Jewish community in Brooklyn.
Wow. Was
And
there any,
Staten Island. She's both.
right, she's both,
Yeah.
right? It has that unique geographic.
Yeah, it is quite unique.
May I ask a question, which I think other people might have in their mind? So, was there any pushback at all in DC to
From
from
anyone?
from
No.
anyone? Like, and you don't have to name names. You don't have to name names, but just like, was
No.
there any at all? So you're saying it was a very so both the Jewish organizations who obviously are fighting anti-Semitism were wanting more of a politically connected partner, and the non-Jews wanted a way to help. Like they saw the need for. Perfect.
We put some non-Jewish people on our board. I mean, and, they were very sympathetic to what's going on, and or had Jewish relatives or good friends who were victims of anti-Semitism. And so it was an important endeavor. And I think everybody just realized that it was something that, whose time had come.
And also non-Jews, see it like
I only wish that it was in power, that CASEPAC was there when Obama was pushing the Iran nuclear deal. That, I think, hopefully, I would like to think, we could have maybe swayed the opinion of some of those congressmen and senators who voted in the wrong way.
I mention case pack often because people, they complain, of course, like to me, there's so much anti-Semitism, I feel overwhelmed. So of course, like, I offer from an education point of view,
Mhm.
but then I say like for actual federal effectiveness, I mention case pack and then I send them the link and to see that there is an entity that is fighting for us that is
I
out
need some help. You know anyone who would like to come and help me with, what do they call that? Back office work, things
there.
like working on my website and helping with correspondence and things like that.
I can definitely help host to LinkedIn and my network and would love to help
Thank
out.
you. Yeah,
Um,
I definitely need some help, like with some of the stuff that we're doing.
Good help is really actually hard to find these days. I've had a
Yes.
few turns, but so we cannot leave the topic of fighting anti-Semitism on a federal level without talking about Title VI and the inclusion of Jews as a race
Mhm.
that President Trump signed into effect. So I'll give my version of what happened. You can give your version and how that is being affected. So my version, I didn't know much about it. All
Yeah.
I knew was that Jews could only go after federal programs who were anti-Semitic from a faith-based point of view. So, like, let's say they were denied, I don't know, to observe the Shabbat, right? Let's say like you were a Jewish student and you had to take, let's say, an exam, and you were being forced to because it was university policy, but you observe Shabbat, so your rights as a Jew under the faith umbrella was being violated by in 2000, like you mentioned Obama. I know that under Obama, this was around 2014 especially, anti-Semitic incidents on college campuses were rising through the roof, and what a
Mhm.
lot of Jewish students were
And he let it.
right, of course, but what a lot of Jewish students were complaining, they wanted to sue the universities, but they were held back because it was anti-Israel hate and it was Jewish, of course, the Jewish homeland, and it was not protected. We were not protected as a race, right? Like races have homelands, faiths do not. So there was this obstacle that was in our way until we were included in the Civil Rights Act, Title VI. So if you can tell the audience and even me a little bit more how that even came about and how much of that as a tool is being utilized today in the fight against Jew hate on campuses?
Well, the second half of your question is harder to answer because it's all a mishmash right now. Like there's so much anti-Semitism. It's hard to understand where it's coming from and why. A lot of times, a lot of people I have found that are anti-Semitic are just anti-Semitic because they want to hate.
Mhm.
So it's easy to pick on the Jews. It's not for any other reason. With regard to Trump's inclusion of Jews as a race under Civil Rights Act 6, effectively it says that Jews are not a race, but that anti-Semitism can be considered racism, right? For legal purposes, and therefore people can be prosecuted under the fullest extent of the law. That's really the simple terms. I could tell you there was a lot of pushback on that, but Trump was steadfast and wanted to push it through. He took a big leap, really, on behalf of American Jews, and because he really wanted to ensure their protection by using the Civil Rights Act.
Right.
That's what he was doing.
It was, to
He
me,
also issued an executive order combating anti-Semitism. He didn't.
see, I didn't even know about that.
Yes, he did. And so he backed it up in case it wasn't going to fly with the Civil Rights Act. So
He had that he had that tool as a backup.
yeah, he had an executive order going there. So the man means what he says, and he says what he means, and he does what he means too. And he's I mean, in the last 16 years, 12 have been Democrat presidents. The other 4 were Trump's. In those 12 years, you can't point to a single positive, forward law or executive order or anything combating anti-Semitism. In those 4 years, Trump didn't have to do what he did. He did it because he truly, honestly believes, and like we do, and he has a Jewish daughter, and son-in-law, and he just truly understands that anti-Semitism is the purest form of hate, and he wanted to put a stop to it. And I think that he was very successful, or his attorneys or his lawyers or whoever it was that really worked on it with him. I'm not sure, but I think some of it was with the help of Lee Zeldin, who's an attorney. But I think that they finagled it. I like using a Jewish word in that sense. So
I love it.
But that Jews are not a race, but that anti-Semitism can be considered racism.
So
right?
I'm going to add to that a little bit.
It comes down to. Yeah.
So Rebecca, I'm going to add to the whole race thing. And I think from an Ashkenaz, and I know a lot of liberals pushed back on Title VI because, they saw that whatever the term race was used. I think that all
stems. Why is it only good? Why is it only good to point out races as long
from other right.
As long as Jews don't benefit. So
exactly.
That's the whole crux of where anti-Semitism and the world today meet.
Right, like API is protected.
All good to feel sorry for everybody else, and let's protect everybody else. Let's worry about everybody else. But the Jews, they're the Jews. We don't need
and here's the fascinating part. And I really would love for all Jews to start understanding, because again, when people ask me, I have a lot of non-Jewish friends who said, why why do a lot of Jews in America, I'm sure you got this too, especially I get it from Republicans. Why do so many Jews in America vote liberal when the Democrat Party hates them? It's the number one question.
I can't understand. I can tell you what I say to them.
Okay, so I understand completely because again, I was part of it. I never voted Democrat except for Cuomo one time. Please forgive me. And one time I voted.
Father?
No, the son. And then one time I voted for. Oh my gosh. Okay, I feel like you're not going to talk to me ever again. One time I voted for Schumer. This is before I woke up and I realized that It doesn't matter if you've never heard of the Republican candidate, you vote Republican down ballot, and that's it, because it's the party, it's not the person. But here's where I am coming
He
from.
used to tell everybody he was a showmare and he's going to look out for us. Meanwhile, he's Schumer, which is a completely different, in which I won't get into the
Right.
or
The
words that is.
nuances. But he's getting booed. He got booed at the Israel Day parade and he got booed at the Dominican parade. So he's just getting booed at all the parades. But anyway, so here's what's actually going on from my vantage point. A lot of Jews in America, again, like we're talking about like the Ashkenaz centric portion. We as especially as Ashkenaz, view ourselves only as a religion, but we're not even a religion. So the actual terminology of religion is to seek converts, actively seek converts, and to spread ideas with intent or force across borders. So I always share Rudy Rockman. I differ with him politically right now, but he did this one great video, and I'm happy to share with you. I share it with everyone. Judaism is not a religion. Everything he said was vetted by JTV. Like they would not put out something that's completely wrong. My Chabad rabbi also stands by that we're not a religion. And why not? Because even the concept of religion, it's it's a post, it's more of a modern terminology. And actually, ancient Hebrew did not even have a word for religion, right? Because the Judeans, our ancestors, everything was around the faith, right? Like entire societies
Their
was
life.
around,
It was their life.
right, right. And everyone in canon before it became Judea and Israel, everyone was Semitic. So no one converted in actuality, right? So when we were fighting other tribes and subjugating them, we didn't convert them, we absorbed them. And they were Semitic anyway. So like, okay, well, we're now under Judean control, so we're going to adopt monotheism. And so it really recalculates even world history. So we look at Hindus, right? Hindus are a race with a strong faith and culture and customs, just like we are, just like the Assyrians are, just like the Japanese with Shintoism, right? They're also not a religion. So there are three religions: Islam, Christianity, and Buddhism. I was shocked that Buddhism is considered like a religion and not. Well, yeah, because they don't have,
Billions of people are Buddhist.
exactly.
Yeah.
So that's the thing. So one, and there are Jews who are atheist. And so a religion, if someone doesn't believe, let's say someone's Christian and they stop believing in Jesus, or someone is Muslim and stops believing that their prophet is Muhammad, they're no longer that religion, right? But they go back to being their race. So, they're Indian Muslims, they're French Muslim, you can be any nationality. So religions do not have homelands, but races do. And also genetics came out, right? So like all the lost tribes that we thought were lost are all found, and they were found by genetics. So what happened in America, again, like from my understanding and having family who obviously was murdered in the Holocaust, because the Nazis were so focused on race. So the Nazis actually were, let me phrase this properly before I get hate mail. So the Nazis were not incorrect in labeling Jews as a race. What they were evilly wrong about, obviously, was that they labeled Jews as an inferior race, which we're not, obviously. So that's, I think, the messaging that's getting lost in a lot of American Jews who tend to be, Ashkenaz, and their families were all murdered. So they hear race and immediately they think Hitler. Immediately they think, like, oh my gosh, so like, under Hitler, during the Holocaust, we were a race and that's why we were murdered. So we're not a race and we're a faith. And that is what actually is hurting our narrative here in America, because then a lot of these anti-Semites, and I talk to them, I see them in the streets, they'll say, well, you can be a Jew anywhere. Why do you need Israel? Right? You can be a practicing Jew in Mexico. And remember Uganda, Herzl almost like had us, there, and the Russian Jews saved that disastrous position. So that's the thing. So I think we all need to go back to basics and say, like, yes, we are a race. We're part of the J1 haplogroup. Yeah, I remember being in the hospital when I had my septic shock, and they didn't know what was wrong with me, and I had very non-Jewish doctors, by the way, who at one point they were not frustrated with me, they were frustrated with the results. And they were like, let me ask you a question. Are you genetically Jewish? I said, yes. So then they ran specific tests.
Right.
to see like what genetically could have been going on. So even they knew, or like my sister, she just had a baby, well, 2 years ago, and they asked her, like, are you genetically Jewish? If so, we need to run specific genetic tests to rule out, any
Yeah.
possible
Base X
abnormalities.
and all that. Yeah.
Right. But they're not doing that. I mean, other races have other, different issues, but there's something specific to us. Or if a Jew needs a bone marrow transplant, they
Yeah.
can't get it from a non-Jew, only from a Jew. So I think it's understanding who we are. Oh yeah. So that's the thing. So a lot of these non-Jews who are anti-Israel, they cannot comprehend why we, the indigenous people of Israel, cannot just give up our land. They're like, well, you can be a Jew anywhere you want. Like, why are you bothering these poor Arabs?
We have the burden and the pleasure
Mhm.
of having a religion and a homeland. Um,
Well, a faith and a home, like a
Faith, yeah,
strong faith,
a
right?
faith
Exactly.
and
Yeah.
a homeland. Whereas Muslims are all over the world, and
And they don't have a homeland, right? And they,
yeah,
right.
Hindus could be anywhere, but we have our own homeland.
And the only homeland, and see, and you mentioned something in the beginning that it resonates with me so much. We have a responsibility. I'm going to use that word a lot actually from now on.
Right.
And that's true because when we think about other indigenous peoples around the world, like the Kurds, they're
Mhm.
indigenous to
Yes,
their land is being occupied at the moment, the Assyrians,
right.
Native Americans, we can go on and on and on. We're the only people in the entire history of the world that liberated our homeland after so many years of occupation, 1,812 years. So it is an anomaly. It is something that never happens. Like I remember being in the Southwest, hiking and visiting different Native American reservations. Like I love, like especially like now after October 7th, I feel this affinity more with with Native populations anywhere. And I just felt, I mean, of course, like, I respect them and everything, but like I would ask some of these people, what is like your faith? And they also like, oh, we're Catholics and we're this, that. And of course, we had Jews who were forcefully converted over the years. There are many more genetic Jews out there than are practicing or who self-identify. But who else? Who else liberated their homeland? And that's another reason, like, those who are against us cannot comprehend that, right? Because it's just like natural. It's like, oh, like you're such a minority. You're not supposed to have land. You're supposed to be scattered across the nation.
It's a conundrum,
Right.
it's a situation where if anybody's going to solve it, it'll be the Jews, right?
But when we know who we are and be proud of our history and know how to explain it, it's like when people say like, oh, well, we'll give Israel back to the Arabs. I said, you mean the Arab occupiers that came from 25 different, or like, okay, by the way, Mizrahi Jews are the key. I'll tell you why. Now I have a lot of Mizrahi Jewish friends before growing up, I had zero. I cannot tell you how many of their last names are either Yehuda, Yehudim,
Hmm.
Judea, right?
Yeah.
Or contain Yehuda in their last names in some capacity. And Ashkenaz Jews don't have that. Like, I don't know, have any Jewish friends, Ashkenaz Jewish friends who have our actual name of our provenance
Yeah, you're
in their
right.
last name. Right, right. So we need to, I think we need to just be so proud. And that's what I meant in the beginning. Like, no, of course, I respect non-Jews, many of them, many of them are great, but I think like we're also at a point where, and I fear this, especially with the younger Jews who don't have the confidence or don't know our history very well or don't know about CASEPAC. And that's why it's so, important to highlight CASEPAC. They're feeling hopeless and they're thinking, if I was anyone but Jewish or a Jew, my life would be easier. Perhaps, but there is a sense of continuity and pride, and we are part of this 4,000 plus year nation, this peoplehood. Like I remember being in Israel, and I also want to highlight that a lot of these Jewish organizations, they need to start taking their trip participants into Judea and Samaria. Only Chabad took, out of the 7 trips I was on, only one took us to Judea and Samaria. And
Wow.
you know how beautiful Israel is. Like I can't tell. Like I've traveled almost everywhere in the world. Israel to me is the most beautiful country. It really is, especially Jerusalem. But I did not feel so grounded. I don't even know how to describe it. Like I don't think words are there to emanate what I was feeling. I remember being in the hills of Judea and Samaria, and my feet felt so planted. Like it was just this like metaphysical experience.
It's a beautiful
Yeah.
experience Jew to go to Israel.
And just,
Um,
but especially through Judea and Samaria. And so just standing on those hills, and I was thinking about the Jewish shepherds and the artisans and the fighters and all that history. Like I literally felt again, like I usually am not lost for words, but I literally felt like our history running through my veins when I was there, and like my feet were so planted, like on those hills. And that's what so many, and I know like not all Jews can go to Israel, but just you don't feel that as a Jew anywhere else. Like I've been to all over Europe, I've been to South America, I've been everywhere. Beautiful, beautiful nations.
well, remember, your eyes are probably wider opened than many Jews because
Right.
you really have, delved into the history and you understand where we came from and how we got to where we are today. But a lot of Jews, are they don't even understand why there's anti-Semitism. They don't get it. They don't know. They don't understand. They are almost many Jews are they hide it. They don't even
Right.
talk about being Jewish. They don't want to go to Israel. They don't want to feel it, know it, and do it because it still carries the stigma of
Right.
being, Jewish and comes with hate. It's like, it's like if you want a piece of candy, but it's been dipped in mustard
Mhm.
with, it's like it's a push pull.
It's so true. I had
So
this
nice to hear you talk about your love of Israel, and I would love it, and I share those sentiments. But what I really would like to see is a bigger orchestrated effort of more Jews going to Israel. I will say though that since October 7th, there has been a huge influx
yeah,
of Jews who've never been to Israel before are going.
they're all going. And oh, by the way, we it would be a remiss if we don't mention the most famous one, or at least in my opinion, Michael Rappaport, liberal,
Yeah, yeah.
anti-Trump, never thought about Israel, and like
Came and spoke here to our community a couple
to
weeks.
me, he's like the prime minister of Israel, basically.
Right. Yeah, he's good.
Such a great voice, and it's so
Nice.
funny.
It's a beautiful experience to discover Israel. Um, but more importantly, it's also a beautiful experience to learn who you are, like you have, and come to appreciate who you are and what a gift it is.
And that's the thing too. When we think about anti-Semitism, right? Like, oh my gosh, like it's beyond us, right? It's something that we can't handle. But again, CASEPAC always comes to mind, or some of the things that like I'm doing. We can take pieces of that anti-Semitism and try to push back, right? Like we don't have to tackle everything, but
Right.
if we
That's the point
dismantle,
of case back. I found
right,
just my own lane.
right, like you have your lane, I have my lane. We need other Jews to chart their own lanes. We all need to work together.
Right.
And that's the thing. So little pieces here and there, even with 16, 15 million. By the way, I think that's a lot more because you know how they count the number of Jews in the world from synagogue lists. I don't belong to a synagogue, so I'm not counted probably. And I'm very much a Jew.
15 million plus one.
Yes. So that's the thing. So it's like, like if we're all taking pieces of that horrible, evil virus that's emanating and we inoculate it in our own way, again, we're never going to combat. That's the thing. I think like we need to tell Jews realistically, we're never going to get rid of anti-Semitism. But what we can do is push back on it. You don't have to be a victim. You don't have to say like, oh my gosh, this is
And you
overwhelming.
can back with
Right.
education.
Right.
That's where you come in as somebody who really understands, um, you know, where we are, where we were, where we are today, how we got here, the legitimate. You can make the legitimate case as to who Jews are, why Israel belongs to us,
Right.
and what the history is behind that. I mean, you really can. I mean, the whole story is in the Torah.
Right.
But, even going forward after that, it's a matter of history, but most people don't get an opportunity to learn that. I went to public school.
Right.
I don't even think in public school I learned where Israel was on the map.
I didn't either. I learned about the Catholic
Honestly,
Church. I know all the popes.
yeah, I had to learn where the
Yeah.
Baltic Sea was, but I
Right.
don't think learning where Israel was on the map.
Nope. It was very Eurocentric.
Unfortunately, but my kids all went to yeshiva, so
Mhm.
they
So they have
have
a
a
different
strong
perspective.
understanding. They know who they are. They grew into it as they turned into adults, and now their children are going to yeshiva, and
It's so important. And
it's a
that's the
beautiful.
thing too. It's like, so for you, like for me, it's education. For you, it's policy and politics. So that's the thing I would love for you to share
And
more.
power. You have to take it. You not take the word is not advantage. You have to work with what you're dealt with. You're playing a game of gin, you work with the cards you're dealt. It's the same thing. We have people in power that are making decisions on our behalf, with or without our permission.
That's true.
Right? So what do? You get in there, you get in their face, you get in their ear, and you work together with them. They're really, they want to help. They became, from my experience and the people that I've been working with, the elected officials are elected officials for the same, they went forward for the same reason I did,
Mhm.
to help and to solve problems. And, getting back to what we were originally talking about,
Mhm.
it was to solve problems. And so I'm talking to the people that are willing to work with me and helping to solve problems with regard to anti-Semitism and what's going on in Israel. And that's
And I
really
would
what it all
love,
is.
from a political point of view, because this election is paramount to America's safety, Israel's safety. I would say, I would even venture to say the civilized world's safety. Your really incredible club, and I would love for you to discuss if you have time. First of all, the difference, or first of all, how did the America First Club even come to existence? What is its purpose? And also, because I don't even know, what's the difference between a political club and a PAC? If you could
Okay.
tackle that.
So the Political Action Committee, which is
Okay.
the
Mhm.
acronym for, okay, that is it's a federally registered organization. There are a bazillion rules and regulations.
Mhm.
You can only donate, there are limits to how much money can be given. It's not a tax deductible donation.
Okay.
It's not a nonprofit, but it's not just an incorporation either.
Mhm.
The America First Club, my political club, is a regular corporation. Um, and when we sell tickets to our events, we charge tax because
Mhm.
it's, we pay tax.
Right.
Uh, um, and what we do at America First Club, and by the way, I'm the co-founder.
Mhm.
My partner in crime is my very close and very dear friend, Lauren Malice.
Oh yeah, her name is on the invitations
Yeah.
also. Okay.
Alice, who is a beautiful, wonderful, non-Jewish, incredible, very close friend of mine who I love dearly. And we thought of we originally we were both involved in another Republican organization, but we saw too many holes in that organization. We didn't feel it was being run correctly. She has a similar background to me, that, she was an event planner for many years as well. And she's been part of many different organizations. So we said, you know what, we could do this better than anybody. Let's start our own organization. And so
Well,
that's what we did. And we called it the America First Club, which we were surprised we were able to get that name.
right.
Uh, but we did. And what we do is every month from October through June, we have an event. We exist really to educate conservative thinkers on what's going on in the world of Republican as well as Democrat politics, and what they can do to get involved or stay involved, or to make a difference themselves. So we're hoping that what we're doing and all the excitement that we're creating is contagious and helps people to get involved in politics. Now, a lot of the people that come to our events are out there door knocking, and they're running their own small GOP offices, and they're
Okay.
getting involved. And that's the whole thing. Getting involved is really the first step to making a difference. And We have events every month. We do it at so far, we've always done it at the Trump International Golf Resort, which is, or club, which is in West Palm Beach in Florida. That's where President Trump plays golf.
Wow.
So
Okay.
whenever he's there, and if he feels like it, which has been many times, he walks right into our event.
Wow. Okay.
He comes right up onto the stage, grabs a microphone and starts talking, and he makes us all so proud. He's really awesome. He comes in his golf clothes and his MAGA hat and starts talking. But I think it's very demonstrative of what he's doing,
Mhm.
is he's bringing politics to the people. It's not the other way around. It's
Okay.
not you trying to get to the politics. He actually, and it's what we're doing as America First Club, we're bringing the politics to you. And I wish
You're making it accessible.
we're making it accessible. And I wish, that I had those opportunities when I was younger, but I never did.
That's true.
Um,
I didn't either. I like to me, politics was so separate. It was what
Right, it's
it
too
was what the
far away.
professionals
It's,
did. Right.
it's too hard to understand, and why get involved? But really, it's really not all that. It's not a crazy thing. It's actually very, politics is really a very human force. It's very manageable. It's very easy to understand. It's very easy to be a part of, and believe it or not, it's easy to make a difference. It's not hard.
That's so
And
true.
it really is. And everything from door knocking to, answering or making phone calls and getting out the vote, or taking a class and then being a poll watcher, which I just did. I'm going to be a poll watcher. I'm so excited. There's so many things you could do that, to be a part of it, that this is your country, these people
Mhm.
Washington are making decisions on your behalf, Laureen, on my behalf, on my children and my grandchildren's behalf. Why shouldn't I get involved?
All in our tax dollars too.
It's my tax
Right.
dollars
Yeah.
deciding what to do with them.
Right.
And you know what? Not for anything, but I'm not so happy about the way some of my money is being spent, and I want to get in there and make a difference. And so this is our way of making a difference. And we get a lot of people. We've had everybody from Laura Trump, Donald Trump Jr. We've had Dr. Ben Carson, Kellyanne Conway, Dick Morris. We've had many senators and congressmen. They're all come as guest speakers,
Mhm.
and they come, and we have lunch or dinner, and everybody listens to a few of the people running for office. We let them come up and do their stump speech and get good practice. And then we bring on our main speaker, and they're always accessible afterward. They talk, they take pictures, they've got a book, they're whatever it is. It's just it's a great experience all around, and it's really a lot of fun. I hope you come.
Well, actually, I was going to say on camera, I 1000% am coming to the October event,
Okay,
and
good. October
so,
22nd.
and so is my mom. And
Okay.
actually might bring my best friend, maybe her husband, if they can find a babysitter. So I'm bringing a whole gaggle. And what I'll do for the audience, I'm going to include the links both for CASEPAC and for the America First Club. It's
Thank
going
you.
to be under the video. It's going to be both on Buzzsprout for those who want to listen in to the podcast, and for those who are more visual and want to watch us speak. It's going to be in the comment section. Like I think the first comment we'll have it there.
We have a whole group of people now that we're taking, Lauren and I, as the America First Club presidents, are taking them to Washington, D.C. next week.
I would have loved to have been part of the trip if I wasn't already. I'm actually going to the IAC conference. If I had not signed up, I would have been with you. You
That's
were
okay. It's all right. You'll come again next year.
absolutely, absolutely.
That's
So,
gonna be great.
you're such a powerful woman, and I say that in the most positive way, right? Because you use your intention to help move needles forward, whether it's combating anti-Semitism, whether it's getting involved in politics. That school they were talking about in Brooklyn, and I know we had lunch several years
Imagine
ago.
Academy.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
what's the name of it again?
Called Imagine Academy.
Imagine Academy, and
You go to imagineacademyforautism.org if you want to take a look.
we can add that also to the link. And you told me, we unfortunately don't have the time for it right now, but you told me how that school even came about. So to me, you are a change maker. So for the women that are younger than I am, and I get inquiries also, right? Like, I feel so overwhelmed. Like as a young woman, I don't see like, and a lot of women tell me like, okay, so we don't see a lot of female Zionists that are leaders. Like, we can count them on our hands, unfortunately. What message could you send to these women? Like, what advice would you share with them who
The
want
women
to
who have a voice.
have that voice but are not there yet in maybe their confidence or don't know what route to take, like, so they look like I'm
I
telling
I
you.
I was recently asked this question at the beginning of the summer. I was speaking as a founder of
Mhm,
different organizations, and I'll give you and your listeners the
mhm,
same advice. And that is always, always, always keep your eyes and ears open. Always look, always watch, always listen. Really do more listening than you do speaking.
mhm,
Really listen and watch what's going on around you. Pay attention to sudden change. Pay
mhm.
attention to when there's no change. Um, you can learn so much by looking and watching and asking questions, delving into the past. Um, it was because I saw, when I watched and saw all these kids coming out with autism and there was no place for them to go, right? And parents were just sending one kid to Japan, one kid was going to Connecticut, one kid was staying at home. I mean, there's nowhere for anybody. I said, wait, why don't we just start a school? Let's just do it. But it took a lot of looking, watching, learning, listening. And that's my best advice for somebody who's considering or feels excited about or even thinking about wanting to get involved in the Jewish world with respect to fighting anti-Semitism or even to help a community grow and get stronger in its own way. Um, Take a close look at where the needs are, what's missing. Talk to people, ask them questions. And from that, you could usually start, the ideas, most people are very creative and the
Right.
ideas start to come. And, it doesn't take much to talk to like-minded people and get them on board
And
and
reach out.
reach out, get them on board, get them to understand your point of view, listen to theirs, and then find ways that you could jump these hurdles um, that nobody has ever tried to jump before. It's really not so hard when you have partners and you all have an understanding of what you want to accomplish. Everybody takes a piece of it and you get it done. It's really
Yeah.
not it's really not all that hard. But the before you could put your first foot forward, you just have to really open your ears, open your eyes, open your mind, and look for the problem so that you'll see what it is you can solve, what's in your power to solve it.
That's such excellent advice. And some of that, and like I said, like, there were times, especially in the beginning, I thought of you often. I was like, literally, what would Rebecca do? Like, how would she handle the situation?
Maureen,
But
my
you
number, just call me.
Yeah. Well, now I know you can. And that's so let's talk about this, the need for mentorship. But I came from a corporate background, then transitioned to nonprofit management. And in the nonprofit management community, at least when I was working in it, there were so many mentorship programs. There was overall mentorship, there was female-oriented mentorship. Now that combating anti-Semitism is beginning to shape up into like an actual sector, like from what I'm seeing, maybe that's something that we can look into creating some kind of mentorship program for the young generation that's coming up.
Yeah, you'd be wonderful. And go and get into the schools and start bringing your
Right.
brand
And
of
yours, right?
education, what you know. You've got so much in that brain, Maureen. You got to get out there and tell people and help them in, in easy, straightforward terms that they can understand really, what's going on, what the history is, why Israel deserves to be its own nation, and that it's important to preserve it. and why, and you've got it made. You really do.
And people can learn so much from you. Like, and just think like just from a female point of view, like, like I'm a Republican. I don't do this whole identity politics, but like, reality is like, I was working in female centric industries, nonprofit management. I was working in PR and advertising before, but now I personally have seen some pushback from especially older gentlemen who are not used to women who have voices, right?
Gotta have like a real plan, like a 4 or
Right.
5 point plan. Here's the problem.
Right.
2, 3, 4. This is how we're going to solve it. This is how much time it takes, how much money it takes.
Exactly. And having the confidence. So it's also not, you can't teach confidence, but you can inspire confidence. And like, look, like when I was in my 20s, I didn't have confidence, right? Like I was just like a worker bee and I did what I was told and I didn't question or push
Yeah,
back.
you were young and learning.
I was young, right? Exactly. So just making that leap, from someone who, especially women who are in their 20s, into their 30s, into their 40s and 50s, who see problems and like us, especially you, because you've accomplished so much more overall, within politics, across industries. I just think that maybe it's time to have that some kind, not like a mentorship program where we share what we're doing exactly and to copy it, but to give more guidance to that Gen Z generation or young millennials,
I mean,
to have like mentors. Like I think
happy to help.
mentors are always needed at any age.
I'm happy to help. I'm in.
I think we should talk off camera about that and maybe
Okay.
maybe have something else to our plate. But no, I want to say thank you so much for your time. And
Fun.
I learned, like I thought I knew a lot about CASEPAC. I thought I knew a lot about America First. I thought I knew a lot about your family background. And I ended up learning so much. And that's why I love having these conversations. It's of course for our audience first and foremost, but it's also for me to keep learning and especially from those that I most admire. So thank you so much, Rebecca. I really appreciate your
Let
time.
me wish you a very happy new year coming.
Yeah, Shana Tova.
And Atollah, an easy fast to you and to
Yes.
all of your listeners and everybody around the world. And inshallah, all will be good.
Thank you so much.
All
Okay.
right.
Have a
Bye.
good night and happy watching debate tonight.
Yeah, I can't wait.
Yes, I just realized it's coming up in a couple hours.
Yeah,
All
can't
right.
wait.
Thank you so much. And all the best to your family too.
Thank you too. Take
Okay.
care.